Today we're going to talk about a case that did more than just take a young girl's life, it completely shattered an entire nation's faith in its own justice system. This is the story of Nirmala Panta and a search for answers that is unbelievably still going on. So let's get right into it.
Everything kicked off on what should have been a totally normal day. It's July 26, 2018, and 13-year-old Nirmala Panta hops on her bike to go to a friend's house. It's a short trip, only about 1.5 kilometers, the kind of ride she'd probably done 100 times before.
Yeah, but this time was completely different. After she left her friend's house that afternoon, Nirmala just vanished. She never made it home.
Her body was found the very next day. But what came after that wasn't justice. No, it was just this awful cascade of failures, deception, and so many unanswered questions. So the real question we have to ask here is how? How does a case like this, with so much public outrage, just remain unsolved for years?
Before we dive into the absolute mess of an investigation, I think it's really important we remember who we're talking about. This wasn't just some headline. This was a person, a 13-year-old girl named Nirmala.
And to understand her story, you really have to understand her family's situation. Nirmala lived with her mom, Durga Devi, and her 2 sisters. Her father had actually abandoned them years before, all because he was disappointed he didn't have a son. Her mother worked incredibly hard, running a food stall and even smuggling goods across the border, a really risky job, just to keep the family afloat. They were a family doing everything they could just to get by.
Okay, so let's rewind and walk through that last day piece by piece. It all started so simply. A trip to a friend's house to work on some homework.
So at 11 in the morning, Nirmala gets to her friend Roshni's house. She's there for a few hours, then leaves to head home around 3 p.m. But she never shows up. Her mom, frantic with worry, goes straight to the police. And what do? They refuse to even file a missing persons report. They tell her to just wait until morning. By then, of course, it was far too late. The next day, Nirmala's body was found in a sugarcane field only about 500 meters from her friend's home.
Now, finding her body should have triggered a careful, professional investigation. But instead, well, what happened next was a textbook example of just how badly things could go wrong.
The list of failures here is just mind-blowing. The crime scene? It was never secured. In fact, a video actually surfaced showing a police officer washing Nirmala's trousers, a critical piece of evidence, in a nearby stream. They didn't bring in any service dogs, and the district police chief, he didn't even bother to show up for 4 days. This goes way beyond a simple mistake. This is a total breakdown of procedure.
And if you need one detail to really understand the official attitude here, get this. While Nirmala's mother was at the station, literally begging them to find her daughter, the inspector on duty was reportedly just sitting there, drinking a beer. It just says everything you need to know about the indifference that would define this whole case.
Well, you can imagine what happened next, right? As word got out about this disastrous investigation, the public's grief just boiled over into pure rage. People poured into the streets all across Nepal demanding justice.
But the state didn't respond with reassurance or promises of a better investigation. No, they responded with violence. The protesters who were demanding answers were met with tear gas and, unbelievably, live bullets. The very people who were supposed to protect them were now attacking them.
And the tragedy just got deeper. During one of these protests, the police opened fire on the crowd, and a 14-year-old boy named Sunny Khanna was killed. He was out there marching for justice for Nirmala, and he ended up becoming another victim of the state's failure.
So with all this public pressure building and the real investigation going absolutely nowhere, the police tactics, well, they took a really dark turn. It seemed like their goal changed from finding who was actually responsible to just finding anyone to blame. It became this awful, predictable cycle. First, the police would arrest some vulnerable person, often someone with mental health issues or from a poor background. Then, they'd hold a press conference, announce a confession, only for the DNA test to come back later and show no match. The suspect would be quietly let go, and the whole charade would start all over again.
And this wasn't just a theoretical pattern. Real people got caught up in this. There was Dilip Singh Bista, a mentally challenged man who locals swore was being framed. Then, 2 of Nirmala's neighbors. They even brought in Nirmala's friend Roshni and her sister, questioning them because of some suspicious behavior. But in every single case, they were eventually released. Every time, any hope for a breakthrough was just crushed.
So, after all the protests, all the arrests, all the media attention, where is the case today?
The short answer? Absolutely nowhere.
I mean, just look at the efforts made to get justice. Nirmala's parents traveled for 35 hours to meet with the Prime Minister. They got assurances, but zero results. A formal complaint was filed against 8 of the police officials for their negligence. But what happened? The case was closed, and they were all acquitted. And that DNA investigation? It's technically ongoing, but there are no leads.
And think about this for a second. More than 120 different people have had their DNA tested against the evidence found on Nirmala's body. Over 120, and not a single one has been a match. It just shows you the sheer scale of the investigation, but also the scale of its complete and utter failure.
There's a saying in Nepal that really captures how people feel about this whole thing. Nepal ko kanun diabole janun. It basically means only God knows Nepal's laws. It reflects this really deep-seated belief that the justice system is just arbitrary, that it's broken, and that in the end it just can't deliver.
So what are we left with here? Nirmala's case has become so much more than an unsolved crime. It's a story about what happens when the institutions that are supposed to protect you are the very ones that fail you in the most profound way possible. And it forces us all to ask a really tough question. When the system itself is the obstacle, where do people even turn for justice?